How you doing? How are you doing? I'm gonna ask this question one more time to see if I can get an honest answer. How are you doing? Some people can't be honest about answering that question. So sometimes you gotta probably rephrase how you ask it. How are you doing? Push that like button. Come on in. Show me some love. Somebody said that I'm gonna be famous by in the morning. I don't know what I did. It said I'm finna be super famous by in the morning. Push that like button. Are y'all ready for this conversation? Do y'all know what's going on right now in the world? I don't think y'all know what's going on. Oh my God. Thank y'all for coming in, pushing that like button. Tonight is steak and potatoes. You know I'm finna eat steak, potatoes, news, and more. So, before we get started, I would like for everybody to come in, push the like button. Subscribe to my channel if you ain't already a subscription. And I learned some mistakes, and I learned not to make the same mistake twice. Do anybody know what type of America we live in? Huh?
We've been telling clients it's nearly impossible to sell a home in winter. Not true. I just help them sell directly to Opendoor. It's hassle-free. Wait, this isn't going on the internet, is it?
It's true. Open Door makes selling easy in any season.
Our older son was working on his bachelor's degree, and I didn't have one. So when I got my bachelor's, I said, okay, now how can I challenge my kids? And so it was like, well, let me go get my master's.
I want to tell you about another Black woman who suffered a horrific ordeal. The injustice and brutality that she faced was a result of her being both Black and a woman. This is an important story to tell because it's not just about one Black woman who suffered. Her story is a part of a larger story of Black women who have suffered under the weight of injustice and oppression. Black women who have been brutalized and mistreated for no other reason than they were Black women. This video and the story I'm going to tell you about is a continuation of another video I did about a Black child named Mary Booth. Mary was falsely accused and convicted and sentenced to die by hanging at age 13 for a crime that she did not commit. She suffered tremendously. From being almost lynched to being abused in prison, her life was full of pain. And so many of you were really touched and moved by Mary's story. So we decided to cover that topic more here in this video. There was so much more that I wanted to talk about as it relates to the demonization of Black women in the Mary Booth video. But I couldn't because it would have been too long. So what I want to do here is delve deeper into this subject and tell you another tragic story of a Black woman who suffered. I'm not going to repeat all of the historical context I shared in the Mary Booth video, so I encourage you to watch that video if you haven't already. I provide a really good history on how the narrative that Black women are dangerous was shaped and created. But I do want to share with you some additional information that I didn't get into in the last video. So give me a few moments to talk about this, and then I'll get into what happened to the Black woman. At least 150 Black women were lynched, and thousands more were attacked and violated by white mobs in the American South between the years of 1880 and 1965. The lynching of Black women called into question white Southerners' defense of this barbaric mob violence ritual. They maintained that this practice was necessary to protect white women who were being attacked by Black men. But the fact that so many Black women were lynched for things like arson and poisoning and causing offense to a white person contradicted this idea that lynching was only used on black men to prevent attacks on white women. This was a lie. Lynching had nothing to do with protecting white women. It had to do with brutalizing black people because they were black. We know it was a lie because if the only reason for lynching was to protect white women from black men, then why was a black woman named Emma Fair lynched in 1893? A mob stormed the jail in Alabama and fired at her and 4 black men as they were in the cell who were accused of burning a white man's cotton gin. If lynching was only about protecting white women from black men, then Mahalia Jackson and Luke Carter would not have been lynched in 1893 in Quincy, Mississippi for being complicit in poisoning a white family, even though a coroner's jury found them innocent. A black woman named Julia Metz would not have been lynched in 1891 for allegedly setting fire to the barn of her employer, J.S. Blaylock. After being arrested, Julia was taken from the constable and hanged from a tree. I could keep going on and on and on with stories of countless black women who were attacked and beaten and lynched well into the 20th century, and every time, the brutality against them was justified. White newspapers would often defend lynchings of black women. They would describe black women as being vicious and dangerous or monstrous. Public opinion had to be swayed in favor of lynching when it came to women. So the white press made sure that black women were portrayed in the worst possible light to justify the mob's actions against them. It was easy to justify the lynching of a black man. The accusations of violating white women received no pushback when it came to lynching black men. But that wasn't the case for black women. There was no comparable crime that would justify the lynching of a black woman. So the monstrous and dangerous black woman had to be created. The lynchings of black women exposed the real reason behind Southern lynching, and that was to ensure that the caste system that kept black people on the bottom rung of society was maintained at all costs. This idea of black women poisoning white families went back to slavery. Enslaved black people not only worked in the fields, but also in the slave owners' homes. And slave owning whites maintained a fear about being poisoned by the enslaved black people that they were keeping in bondage and brutalizing. In 1751, South Carolina passed a law that made it illegal for a black person to teach another black person anything about any poisonous plant, herb, root, or poison. It made this crime punishable by death. In Charleston, an enslaved black woman was burned alive after a white infant came up sick and they accused her of poisoning their child. In 1886, a black woman named Eliza Woods was accused of poisoning a white woman she worked for as a cook named Mary Wooten. It was claimed that Mary Wooten had arsenic in her stomach, and when Eliza's house was searched, a rat poison called rough on rats was found in it. That was all the evidence that was needed to accuse, arrest, and lynch Eliza. A mob of 1,000 men formed and dragged Eliza from jail, stripped her naked, and hanged her from a tree in front of the courthouse. After she was hanged, the mob fired at her body. Papers referred to Eliza as a black female devil who deserved what she got. This was the environment that black women were living in. They were under full assault at all times from all directions. And this was the environment that Jenny Steers found herself in when she became another black woman to suffer at the hands of those who did not see her as human and were quick to accuse, convict, and execute her without taking a breath or blinking an eye. Jenny Steers was born Jenny Clayton in August of 1877 in Northwest Louisiana. Both her mother and her father were from Louisiana. We don't know their names because we weren't able to locate any census records before the year 1900 that will help us to detail Jenny's family history. Jenny never attended school and could not read or write. In September of 1898, she married a man named Alex Steers. Together, they had 2 children, a son named Walter, who was born 1 year before they married in 1897, and a son named Robert, who was born in 1900. Something happened between 1898 when Jenny and Alex married because the 1900 U.S. Census, which was taken in early June, states that Jenny was a widow raising her 2 sons by herself. Around this time, Jenny worked as a farmer and a sharecropper and lived on or near a plantation called Cross Keys Plantation. This was about 30 miles down the river from Shreveport. Sometime in the summer of 1900, Jenny moved to Shreveport. She worked as a domestic worker in the home of a white woman named Alice Matthews. The Matthews family lived in the downtown Shreveport area and ran a boarding house that sometimes had as many as 35 people staying there at a single time. Before I get into what happened to Jenny Steers, it's important for me to give you one more piece to this horrific story. It can be argued that this incident was one of the reasons whites in Shreveport were so quick to condemn Jenny Steers. In April of 1903, tragedy struck the Matthews home. On Saturday, April 12, 1903, someone broke into the home of Alice Matthews in the early morning hours and brutally attacked Alice and her 10-year-old daughter, Eileen. Alice was attacked with an axe and died from her injuries. Alaine was also seriously injured, but she ended up surviving. It wasn't until 6 a.m. when a black woman named Mary Wells, who worked as a cook, and Jenny Steers, who worked as a housemaid, arrived to begin their day at work when the gruesome crime scene was discovered. When Mary and Jenny reached the kitchen, they saw a bloody footprint on the floor. This led to the bedroom where the two women discovered Alice Matthews, who had been horrifically attacked and left for dead. The scene was so bloody and so gruesome that Jenny screamed out in fear and woke everyone in the home. Alice was attacked with an axe as she slept in her bed.
Once you're involved in something like this, the stress level, it can tear up a family.
He said he was tried in the court of public opinion before he ever stepped foot in a courtroom, but surveillance video helped shed light on what actually happened. From the headlines, it seemed pretty cut and dry. Then 50-year-old Ford employee Billy Cowart was charged with attempted murder for shooting his gun in the United Auto Workers 551 parking lot in June 2016.
To have everything you worked for taken away.
Cowart was suspended and then terminated from his job with Ford, where he'd worked for nearly 2 decades.
I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders.
Billy Cowart used his firearm in self-defense, and it seemed like the whole world was against him. But before we get into this surveillance video and the discussion of what happened to Billy, I want to let you know we have a gun giveaway going on. It's happening right now.
When 10-year-old Alaine heard her mother being attacked, she came to see what was going on. The intruder then struck her twice over the head with the axe. Alaine was discovered next to her mother's body. She played dead during the attack. She barely survived what happened. This crime shocked all of Shreveport. Everyone wanted to know how this happened, who did it, and when they would be captured. There was no clear motive because all of Alice Matthews' valuable jewelry was left on her person and in her room. Her diamond rings were still on her fingers when her body was discovered. The police began investigating immediately. A coroner's jury was also called to investigate this incident. Shortly after the discovery of Alice Matthews' body, police received a note at the Shreveport Police Headquarters saying that a black man was seen with bloodstains on his shirt. Police immediately put together a search party and went looking for this unknown black man in the area where the note said that he was. After searching, police spotted a 35-year-old black man named Albert Washington coming out of the woods, walking towards the road. Albert had no connection with Alice Matthews or her boarding house. The police said that Albert had blood on his shirt, and when they asked him to stop, he ran. The police fired at Albert as he ran away and took his life. His body was then stolen from the undertaker and burned on the street in downtown Shreveport for all to see. Everyone thought that the case was solved. Albert's story is very sad. Albert worked in Bossier Parish as a laborer on a plantation. The two white men he worked for said that Albert had worked for them all day, and afterwards, he and other black men took the train to Shreveport. Once in Shreveport, Albert went to the hospital to see his wife, who was sick. When he arrived at the hospital, he was told that she had been moved to DeSoto Parish. Albert made his way to the train, and it was during this walk to the train that he was stopped by the police and they took his life. A grand jury was later convened to investigate the death of Alice Matthews. Judge Alfred D. Land presided over the grand jury, and he told the grand jury members that the police had the lawful right to take the life of Albert Washington to prevent his escape. But after investigating, the grand jury still had no idea as to the motive for the crime. But there was one more thing that was discovered that officials were starting to realize, and that was that Albert Washington had nothing to do with Alice Matthews' death. All of this set the stage for what was going to happen to Jenny Steers. With her employer dead, Jenny went back working on the Cross Keys plantation. The plantation was now owned by John Dolan. He was a very prominent citizen in Shreveport, and he was also someone who was no friend to black people. He once bragged about how he was glad that white rule had been restored to the South after Reconstruction ended. The Dolans had a daughter named Elizabeth. She was around 16 years old in 1903. On July 25th of that year, Elizabeth became ill and she died after consuming a cup of lemonade that had been poisoned with strychnine. It's a toxic, odorless, and colorless pesticide that can be fatal if ingested. When Elizabeth died, papers all across the state carried the story. She was the daughter of one of the state's most powerful and prominent white men. Without any real reason, suspicion quickly turned to Jenny being the one who gave Elizabeth the poison lemonade. And just like that, plans began to be made to find Jenny and lynch her. Jenny must have sensed that she was in danger because she fled the plantation. I can only imagine how fearful Jenny must have been. Here was this 26-year-old widow mother of 2 boys. And this was a time when segregation and racial discrimination was seen as normal. No one protected black people. Jenny had already seen what happened to Albert Washington just 3 months before, and we can safely assume that she was aware of other black people who had been brutalized and lynched. She likely was consumed with fear for herself, but also for her 2 boys. A mob of white men searched the area looking for Jenny. After searching all over, they found her hiding in a hayloft near Bayou Lachute. When the men found Jenny, they questioned her about the Dolan girl's death. Jenny denied having anything to do with the girl's death, but the mob did not care. She was dragged out, and Jenny was taken back to Cross Keys Plantation. This must have been terrifying for Jenny because this was not a situation that black people typically made it out alive from. Once back at the plantation, the Dolan family identified Jenny as the one who poisoned their daughter. The mob then took Jenny to a nearby tree. They tied a rope around her neck. They tied her hands and her feet. The mob then asked Jenny to confess to the crime. Jenny again said that she did not poison the girl. Mob members pulled the rope and hung 26-year-old Jenny Steers from the tree until she was dead. As her body dangled, members of the mob fired at Jenny. After Jenny was lynched, the press and public continued to go after her. Papers expressed regret for her death, not because they believed that Jenny was innocent, but because they wanted Jenny to tell them what happened to Alice Matthews. People began saying that Jenny was the one who attacked Alice Matthews and her daughter Aline. Jenny was now portrayed as a diabolical black woman who attacked respected white women. One paper actually said this. It said that Jenny was one of the most diabolical female criminals that the country had ever known. Initially, the press and the police advanced a theory that a man attacked Alice Matthews and her daughter for the purpose of violating them. But after Jenny Steers was lynched, the press did a 180 and presented a new theory that was designed to blame Jenny Steers. By late July, after Jenny's lynching, the press said that it was robbery and not outrage and violation that was the motive for the Matthews crime, and that a woman was the culprit because the wounds on Alice Matthews' body were too shallow to have been inflicted by a man. After initially claiming that nothing had been stolen, the papers reported that money was missing. The story was altered to make it seem like Jenny Steers was the brutal attacker to justify her lynching. The press also said that Jenny had previously tried to take Elizabeth's life on 2 prior occasions. They said the first time, Jenny put strychnine in Elizabeth's lemonade, but that she refused to drink it because she sensed that something was in it. On the second alleged attempt, they said that Jenny had tried to lure Elizabeth into a rowboat to drown her, but Elizabeth was afraid of water and refused to get in. Another paper said that Jenny was jealous of Elizabeth because Elizabeth was engaged to a white man that Jenny had been intimate with. The rumors about Jenny were outlandish. The paper said that she was violent and that she had gambled outside the church with black men. One paper said that Jenny was so violent and so strong that once she fought another black woman in the field, and it was difficult to pull Jenny off of the other black woman. All of this hysteria about the violent, villainous black woman who was driven by sexual passions was designed to create fear of Jenny and justify the lynching of her. They wanted to make sure that no one felt sorry for Jenny Steers or any other black woman. I should also tell you that after Jenny was lynched and blamed for the Matthews crime, just 1 month later, a similar attack took place. In August of 1903, a white couple in Shreveport, Robert and May Smith, were brutally attacked in their beds as they slept. The intruder used an axe. May died from her injuries. It was at this time that the press changed their story once again. They found similarities in this crime to that of Alice and Aline Matthews, and also with that of 2 other women, Josephine LaCow and Marie Wheeler, 2 women attacked in the same way before the Matthews crime. Now the press and the authorities were sure that it was a single man who was responsible for all the crimes, a reversal from when they had said that a woman, mainly Jenny Steers, was responsible for all of this. The police claimed that a man named Jim Reed confessed to the crime and was responsible for attacking Robert and May Smith with an axe. The police said that Jim was having a relationship with May, but in 1904, a jury was unable to reach a verdict in Jim's case. An interesting twist that we found was that Jim Reed was represented by A.D. Land Jr., the son of the judge that said that it was lawful to take Albert Washington's life, and the prosecutor was Judge Land's brother, John Land. At Jim Reed's second trial, the prosecution dropped all charges against him and said that they had no evidence that he had committed the attack. After it was all said and done, 3 black people had been blamed for Alice Matthews' death. 2 had lost their lives as a result of it, Albert Washington and Jenny Steers. Neither had anything to do with this crime. The mob, whites in Shreveport, and the press were quick to justify Jenny Steers' lynching because they claimed that she was responsible for 2 white women's deaths. We don't know if Jenny poisoned Elizabeth Dolan. There is strong evidence to suggest she did not. But what we do know is that her being a black woman during a time when black women were demonized and made out to be monsters, gave all the cover that was needed for the mob to lynch her and never asked a single question. At the time of Jenny's death, her son Walter was 5 and her other son was 3. We don't know what happened to them, but what we do know is that in the span of 3 years, they lost both their mother and their father. And they too lived the rest of their lives likely under Jim Crow rule in the South. They lived and died lives filled with injustice, filled with pain, and filled with horrific memory. Being black has always been associated with criminality. Stories were created and exaggerated to justify brutality against black people and black women in particular. If you were black, there was no need to conduct an investigation or ask any questions. Being black convicted you and executed you. I want to know your thoughts on the story. Had you ever heard of Jenny Steers, and how did it make you feel learning all that she went through? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts.
Before we start this episode, that's coming. Take an animated trip around the global issues and learn how unique America really is. Enjoy the rest of our free videos for all ages when you subscribe at PragerU.com.
Welcome to Colombia, a land of mountains, rainforests, and spirited people. Colombia sits on the northwest corner of South America, sharing a border with Peru, Ecuador,
From the haunting discovery of
As you can see, this is a truck, and it's unloading several hundred pounds of orange peel and pulp right in the middle of a national park in Costa Rica.
Iran opens the vaults. Black Israelites were the first chosen people. In a world where history often feels set in stone, an unexpected voice has emerged to shake the very foundations of biblical scholarship. Iranian scholars, delving deep into ancient archives, have unveiled claims that could rewrite everything we think we know about the chosen people. Could the Black Israelites have been the first chosen people, their origins hidden for centuries beneath layers of Western narratives? Iran's findings are not just a revelation, they are a challenge to our most deeply held beliefs. This dramatic turn of events finds its roots in Iran's unique historical position. The Persian Empire, which played a pivotal role in liberating the Israelites from Babylonian captivity, has long been intertwined with the biblical narrative. But now Iran's historians and archaeologists suggest that they possess ancient texts and records Western scholars have either ignored or suppressed, texts that paint an entirely different picture of who the Israelites were and where they came from. What secrets has Iran uncovered that the world isn't ready to hear? This question sets the stage for a journey into an alternative biblical history, one that ties the origins of the Israelites not solely to the Middle East, but also to the heart of Africa. If this exploration intrigues you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about these revelations? Let's start the conversation. 1. What are Iranians saying about Black Israelites? Iranian historians and scholars bring a distinctive perspective to the Black Israelites narrative, emphasizing connections between the ancient Israelites and Afro-Asiatic civilizations, including Kush, Egypt, and the broader African continent. This viewpoint diverges sharply from the mainstream Western interpretation, which often confines the Israelites' identity to the Middle East. By highlighting the linguistic, cultural, and spiritual overlaps among Afro-Asiatic societies, Iranian academics argue that the Israelites' roots are deeply intertwined with African civilizations. These civilizations, which thrived in regions spanning Northeast Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, shared foundational elements such as Semitic languages, religious practices, and cosmological frameworks that later influenced biblical traditions. Iran's focus on its historical interactions with the Israelites further illuminates the pivotal role of the Persian Empire in shaping their narrative. Cyrus the Great, a figure celebrated in both Persian history and biblical texts, is credited with liberating the Israelites from Babylonian captivity in 539 BCE. This act of emancipation, recorded in the book of Isaiah and corroborated by Persian inscriptions like the Cyrus Cylinder, is portrayed by Iranian scholars as a gesture of not merely political strategy, but also cultural kinship. They argue that Cyrus's respect for the Israelites stemmed from an awareness of shared spiritual and historical roots between the two peoples. Persian sources describe the Israelites' exile and return in terms that highlight their alignment with Afro-Asiatic and Persian values, rather than solely with the Middle Eastern milieu often emphasized by Western academia. This historical lens expands the narrative of the Israelites, situating them as a bridge between Africa, the Middle East, and Persia. Iranian researchers contend that the Israelites' origins and early identity were shaped by a dynamic confluence of Afro-Asiatic and Persian influences. This recontextualization challenges traditional biblical scholarship by suggesting that the Israelites were not a purely Middle Eastern people, but participants in a broader Afro-Asiatic cultural sphere that included African civilizations. In addition to reevaluating historical ties, Iranian scholars propose groundbreaking theories about the Israelites' identity, including the possibility that the Black Israelites were the original chosen people. Drawing from ancient Persian texts, oral traditions, and archaeological discoveries, they argue that early Hebrews exhibited significant cultural and physical affinities with African societies. These claims, though controversial, are rooted in evidence often overlooked by Western narratives, including descriptions of Israelites in Persian archives that align more closely with African features and traditions than with contemporary depictions. For instance, Iranian texts and artifacts describe early Israelites as having physical traits and cultural practices that resonate with African heritage, such as darker skin tones and Afro-Asiatic linguistic patterns. This challenges long-held assumptions, prioritizing Middle Eastern identity in the biblical narrative. Persian accounts also emphasize the Israelites' connections to Kush and Egypt, civilizations known for their profound influence on the ancient world. Iranian researchers argue that these connections were not incidental, but fundamental to the Israelites' development as a distinct people. They highlight the shared spiritual frameworks among these societies, including monotheistic tendencies and mythological parallels, as evidence of a deeper bond. These theories prompt a reconsideration of the Israelites' identity, raising provocative questions about the intersection of race, religion, and history. Could the Israelite story, as told in the Bible, be as much African as it is Middle Eastern? Iranian scholars suggest that the erasure of these African connections may have been a deliberate byproduct of later historical interpretations that sought to distance the Israelites from their Afro-Asiatic roots. Such a revisionist history, they argue, marginalizes the role of African civilizations in shaping one of the world's most influential religious narratives. Iranian academics further critique the Eurocentric portrayal of biblical figures in art and literature, which often depicts Israelites as fair-skinned and culturally westernized. They propose that these depictions are not only inaccurate, but also part of a broader pattern of historical misrepresentation. By re-examining Persian, African, and biblical sources, Iranian researchers seek to reconstruct a more nuanced and inclusive narrative that acknowledges the Israelites' ties to both Africa and the Middle East. The implications of these claims are profound, particularly for modern discussions on identity, race, and religion. If the Israelites were indeed more closely tied to African civilizations than traditionally acknowledged, this revelation could reshape understandings of biblical history and its cultural legacy. It would challenge dominant Western narratives and elevate the contributions of African and Afro-Asiatic societies in shaping the world's religious and historical heritage. For Iranian scholars, this perspective is not merely an academic exercise, but a reclamation of overlooked truths. By situating the Israelites within a broader Afro-Asiatic context, they aim to highlight the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations and the shared humanity that transcends modern racial and cultural divisions. This approach underscores the importance of revisiting historical narratives with a critical eye, recognizing the biases that have shaped them, and embracing a more holistic understanding of the past. While these theories remain contentious, they provoke valuable dialogue about the nature of history and the ways in which it's constructed. Iranian researchers argue that acknowledging the Afro-Asiatic dimensions of the Israelite story enriches rather than diminishes its significance. It situates the Israelites within a vibrant and diverse cultural mosaic, reflecting the complexity and interconnectedness of the ancient world. For scholars, theologians, and lay people alike, this perspective offers a fresh lens through which to explore the enduring legacy of the Israelites and their role.
It's 2025, and you're still using the same cable network? Frontier Fiber.
Tonight, President Trump testing the limits of his power. The White House ordering a pause on multiple forms of federal financial assistance. The chaos and confusion in Washington and the swift backlash, including lawsuits. A federal judge late tonight delaying the start date. Plus, President Trump's new buyout offer for all federal employees. ICE roundups in New York City. The new Homeland Security Secretary there, as undocumented immigrants are arrested, including, she says, a ringleader of a violent gang. Dangerous outbreak, the unprecedented spread of tuberculosis in Kansas. The historic number of cases detected. Kennedy family split on the eve of his confirmation hearing to lead American health agencies. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s cousin, Caroline Kennedy, blasting him as a, quote, predator. Returned to Auschwitz. She was a 14-year-old when the Nazi death camp was liberated. At age 94, she returns for the first time, showing our Jesse Kirsch what she says the world must remember. TikTok's newest suitors, the big tech execs who could be lining up to buy the popular app as the new deadline to avoid a shutdown nears. The Airbus A321 catching fire while preparing for flight. Plus the good news tonight for two beloved endangered manatees returning to the sea.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. The speed of President Trump's rush to remake the federal government may have left some in its wake today and ultimately caused a federal judge to step in, temporarily halting an abrupt Trump administration order to pause spending on federal grants and loans. The order, outlined in an early morning memo, left many organizations that depend on federal funds, from nonprofits to state programs, confused and scrambling for some clarity. The White House stressing the spending pause would not apply to funds that are directly paid to individuals. The two-page memo from the Office of Management and Budget specifically calls out foreign aid and programs that tend to be favored on the political left. The court today pausing the White House plan for a week. But now tonight, a sweeping new shakeup to report, hitting the email boxes of every federal worker. It's where we begin with Garrett Haake.
Yes.
Tonight, as part of his promise to reduce government spending, President Trump is making more than 2 million federal workers an offer. Quit now and accept a separate package. NBC News first reporting federal employees received the offer by email late this afternoon. The White House expects 5 to 10% of the federal workforce to accept it, which could lead to $100 billion in annual savings. But tonight, in a blow to the administration, a federal judge has temporarily blocked the president's attempt at another government shakeup, after the Office of Management and Budget overnight ordered a temporary pause on grant, loan, or federal financial assistance programs that might run counter to President Trump's executive orders.
It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies. President Trump is looking out for you by issuing this pause because he is being a good steward of your taxpayer dollars.
Democrats immediately assailed the president's action.
Law enforcement, rural hospitals, aid to the elderly, food for people in need. This decision is lawless, dangerous, destructive, cruel.
While several state Democratic attorneys general sued to block the move.
When Congress dedicates funding for a program, the president cannot pull that funding on a whim.
But Republicans defending the freeze.
Let's get a handle on all this spending and figure out if it's going where it's supposed to go.
Tonight, the White House saying individual federal assistance would not be paused or reviewed under its plan.
Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause.
But all of it sparked confusion about who would be impacted. The White House says Head Start, the early childhood education program for low-income families, would not be affected. But Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy posting, quote, Head Start reimbursement system is shut down in his state. What was your reaction when you heard about this order overnight?
Yeah, it was a shock to ask.
While in Florida, Talithia Edwards' 4-year-old son Raymond is one of the more than 800,000 children served by the program. She told me the uncertainty is nerve-wracking.
You look at other options, but there aren't many options when you think about affordability in child care.
Garrett, that judge temporarily blocking the pause on federal assistance until a hearing next week. Meantime, President Trump has issued a new executive order impacting